in the work of independent human rights institutions and will feature adolescent and IHRIs perspectives from Montenegro, the Philippines, and Canada, including adolescent golden advisors to Montenegro's ombudsman. These case studies will include situations where there are dedicated IHRIs for children, such as a children's advocate, a commissioner, and others where there are broad-based national human rights institutions that are charged with promoting and protecting children's rights. Irrespective of form or model, what matters most is that there exists an IHRI that has the responsibility and the capacity to independently promote and protect the rights of all children. These presentations will be followed by a Q&A session. So we are now ready to start. I would like to ask you to all put yourselves on mute, except the presenters, obviously. So I'm pleased to give the floor to our first speaker, Ms. Jerison Lansdowne, an independent expert who supported the development of UNICEF tool on children's participation in the work of IHRIs. Jerison Lansdowne was the founder-director of the Children's Rights Alliance for England and has since worked as an international consultant and advocate, publishing and lecturing widely on the subject of children's rights. She wrote 2 publications for the UNICEF Innocenti Center on Human Rights Institutions for Children. She supported the Committee on the Rights of the Child in the development of several general comments. She was also actively involved in the development of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and worked with the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to draft a general comment on inclusive education. Thank you for being with us. Jerison, over to you.
Okay. So can you put the PowerPoint up? Is it possible to put the PowerPoint on the screen? Manel, is somebody going to put the PowerPoint up? So
yes, just checking if others can see the PowerPoint because it's being shared at the moment.
Oh, I can't see it.
So it looks like it's being seen by others, Jerison. So okay. I'll be able to move it on as you speak.
Okay, so I better get the screen up for myself then. Hang on a minute. Okay, hang on. I wonder why I can't see it. It's very strange. Okay. Sorry about this.
So we are now on the first slide, overview of the tool.
Okay. I'm just trying to open it up. So, why won't it open up? Something very peculiar happening with my computer at the moment. I can't. Okay. Oh dear. I'm really sorry about this. I can't get the screen up. Okay. Okay, sorry. So the tool covers a number of different aspects of working with children. So it looks at why do it, what are the positive benefits from it, what do we mean by participation, where does this concept come from, and what do we understand by it, how to undertake it in a way that is both of a reasonable quality and ethical, and then different ways of engaging children, different approaches to participation, and then looking specifically at different approaches within NHRIs, some of the challenges, and then mechanisms for monitoring and evaluation. So the tool covers all of those different dimensions. So why does it matter? I think we have quite a lot of evidence now over sort of working with the CRC and Article 12 over the last 30 years that listening to children, listening to their perspectives, listening to how policies, laws, services are impacting on their lives enables us to improve the quality of those services and policies. They have a unique perspective to throw on what's happening in their lives and what matters to them, what works and what doesn't work, which we need to listen to if we're going to get those things right. It also enables us to achieve greater accountability to children. It's a way of ensuring that states are accountable to children for the commitments that they've made in ratifying the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Perhaps one of the most important aspects is enhanced protection. What we've seen in many, many years now is that where children are silenced, where children don't have an opportunity to speak, where they're not believed, where there are no vehicles, no mechanisms, no systems in place for them to speak out, that things bad are happening to them, that they're being abused, they're being hurt, it's simply not possible to protect children. So if you look, for example, at what happened in the globally, really, in the Catholic Church, if you look at many, many countries, at the experience of children in institutions, it's been possible for abusers to sexually and physically abuse children in their care without any redress and with relative impunity because children have been silent. So giving children a voice, encouraging them to speak out, making sure that they are believed, that there are mechanisms in place through which they can speak safely and accessibly is a fundamental contribution to protecting children. We also know that it enhances capacity. Children speak repeatedly of once they've had opportunities to participate of being, having more self-esteem, more confidence, more skills, being able to speak out, gaining more knowledge. So there's an enormous benefit to individual children participating. And in turn, they can then contribute to their communities and contribute to civic development. Next slide. And why is it important then specifically for NHRIs? So it enables your work to focus on the issues of most significance and relevance to children. It enables you to, if you're undertaking investigations, doing advocacy or monitoring, that work is informed by the perspectives of children. And it also enables you to serve as a role model or a blueprint to governments or other organizations as to how to undertake participations. You can work as a demonstration model of good practice. It's also important to raise awareness. So children can't exercise their rights if they don't know they have them. So building understanding and awareness of the importance of children's participation, raising this concept, what it means, what it looks like, and how to do it, how to engage children more effectively, should be an important part of the work of NHRIs. And building the capacities and confidence and skills of adults working with children to enable them to work more effectively with children. And then building government's commitment. So I think for many NHRIs, IHRIs, it's possible for them to serve as a conduit, if you like, between children and government, enabling children to access government ministers, government officials, so that they can share their perspectives and their concerns directly with government. You can also encourage the creation of more opportunities for children's civic engagement and potential to contribute to their communities, both at the local and the community level. It's also, I think, an important part of the work to make the case for strengthened legislative and policy provision for children's participation. So it's not just an act of goodwill on the part of an individual teacher or an individual local authority, but it's actually embedded in legislation as an entitlement for all children. And again, it promotes greater accountability for children. Next slide. So Article 12, as you probably all know, it gives the right of every child capable of forming a view, the right to express their view and have their views given due weight in accordance with age and maturity. So the concept of participation emerges from this and needs to be understood alongside the other civil rights, rights to freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of conscience, rights to information and privacy, and so on. And together, this package of rights, which can be understood as participation, transform the status of a child to no longer being a passive recipient of adult protection, but actually being an agent, a social actor who engages in and influences and transforms their own lives. So the next slide, unpacking participation. The Committee on the Rights of the Child has spent a lot of time over the last 30 years really trying to tease out and elaborate what this actually means in practice. And a lot of this is incorporated into the general comment number 12 that they produced on the right of the child to be heard. So some of the universal features are that all children, it applies to all children without discrimination. The committee have determined that every child capable of forming a view must be extended not just to children capable of verbally articulating in an adult way, but to very young children and even babies. We need as adults to find ways of listening to children and hearing what they're saying. It's both a means and an end. It's an end in its own right. The part of the fundamental dignity of children is their right to be listened to, respected and taken seriously. But it's also a means of achieving the realization of other rights. As I said, it enhances the right to protection, but also education, health, play, and so on. The committee have recognized that it applies to individual children, for example, in relation to their health care, but also to groups of children or constituencies of children within a local authority or a school council or a community group or whatever. And it extends to all matters of concern to them. So it's very, very widely drawn. It's really important that that there is a recognition that the way, although all children have a right to be heard, the way in which you reach out to children will necessarily vary according to their age, according to their context. Children in institutions will you need different mechanisms than children in the community. Children who are 3 will need a different form of engagement than a 17-year-old, and so on. And so multiple different approaches need to be reflected and created and engaged with. And the critically important is that it's important to give weight to the views of children, that you don't just, one of the criticisms is children, they're consulted and then adults go away and then they never hear another thing. So it's really important that weight is given to their views and there is a feedback mechanism which reflects both the age and the maturity of the child. Clearly, participation doesn't take away the right to protection. These two things sit alongside. But it's important to recognize that child participation does differ in many ways from adult participation, that adults don't hemorrhage out of their status as a woman or a person with a disability or a member of a particular ethnic or indigenous group. Children hemorrhage out. So there's a need for ongoing support and ongoing engagement. And nor do children have access to financial resources. So they need continuing support from adults in relation to administrative support, access to the levers of power, funding, and so on. It's very clear that participation is a means of promoting empowerment. It empowers children within, it makes them more self-confident, it raises their self-esteem, it empowers them to engage with their peers and to engage within their community, and it empowers them to change, to create differences towards the realization of their rights. And also it's a right, not an obligation. There should be no obligation to participate. Now, Laura Lundy has created this concept of space, voice, audience, and influence. These are the 4 dimensions that need to be in place in any participatory environment if Article 12 is to be reflected properly. They need to have space, time, and space for participation. They need to have the information and the support to facilitate the expression of their views. There needs to be an audience, somebody listening, somebody in a position of authority, somebody in a position to make a difference, who can influence decisions that impact on children. And there needs to be influence. They need to act on those views as appropriate.
Avez rejoint le bureau de l'emploi, le bureau du défenseur des enfants et de la jeunesse et le bureau du défenseur des aînés. For service in English, press 1. Pour le service en français, appuyez sur le 2.
And then ensuring ethical and quality standards, which I think somebody's going to talk about a bit later. But these are the 9 basic requirements which have been elaborated in the general comment on Article 12.
And the Office of the Senior Advocate.
Is somebody else talking?
Le Bureau du Défenseur des Enfants et de la Jeunesse et le Bureau du Défenseur des
Hello? There's somebody else talking over in French. Can anybody else?
Hi now, Teresa, okay. Go ahead.
Okay. The ethical standards, there are ones that relate to children's experience, that it must be respectful of them, relevant, voluntary, transparent, and informative. There are ones that involve adult commitments, that they must be supported by training and they must be accountable to the children. And the environment that's created must be inclusive, child-friendly, safe, and sensitive to risk. It's also possible to think about 3 different levels of participation, all of which interlink and all of which are valid but give different degrees of empowerment. So this consultative participation tends to be the most common, which is adult initiated and controlled, where children don't have any influence on the process, but it recognizes that there is value in listening to and being informed by children's perspectives. So very, very often an NHRI might, for example, undertake a national consultation as part of the development of a strategic plan for the next 3 years. You know, what are the priorities for children? What are children saying, thinking, feeling? So this would be a consultative process. A collaborative process is one which is initiated by adults but involves a much greater degree of partnership with children, where children have some influence over the process and the outcome. So, for example, if an NHRI has a youth advisory board which it engages with to help it shape and form its policies and priorities within its work. So the children are actually influencing, not just being consulted and then the commissioner acting on that, but actually a much more collaborative process. And then there's child or youth-led, where space is created for young people to identify for themselves the issues they want to focus on. And the role of adults there is as facilitators, not leaders. So there's much more child or adolescent control over the process, leading to greater degrees of empowerment. And participation can take place and should take place in many ways at all these different levels. The individual adolescent in relation to their individual care, but also in collaboration with their peers, and will have impact on the family, institutions that they engage with local communities, national and the international community. So we need to think of participation at operating at all those levels. And the younger the children, the nearer they will be to the family and community environment. So going back to these 3 different dimensions of child participation work within NHRIs that I mentioned earlier, involving them in your work, advocating for a strengthened legislative environment, and promoting awareness. So within the work of the IHRI, the ways in which you might want to think about this is with setting up advisory groups, setting up ad hoc specialist groups, involving young people in research as researchers and consultations, involving them in helping you design your communications and outreach strategy. Children will be very, very switched on in relation to the use of social media and how to use that most effectively. Young people as advocates, many, particularly in Latin America, there are a number of youth advocates who are working with the commissioners to reach out to a wider constituency of children. Children can also be involved in monitoring compliance and also ensuring that you are hearing complaints from them. Again, raising awareness amongst young people by producing leaflets, information, use of social media, getting information out there, and also developing tools and resources and capacity building tools to strengthen capacity to undertake effective participation. And then finally, working with governments to promote legal reform, to engage in dialogue between governments and children, and promoting spaces, opportunities for participation at the community and local government and national level. So there are lots of challenges with this, lots of resistances. We see different ones in different societies, but some start with children are just children. They don't have the knowledge, they don't have the wisdom. We need to take responsibility as adults. And I think once we begin to open up the spaces for children to be listened to, it's very quick to see the change that they can contribute. And it's also remarkable how much adults begin to change their views once they actually see children contributing effectively. There is a danger, which I think used to be expressed. There used to be a lot of concern expressed about participation just being a few professionalized children who would be yanked off to speak at conferences, and the same children would be speaking all the time. I mean, I think it's really important to engage a wide range of children in different issues with different perspectives. So you need to be reaching out to children with disabilities, children from Indigenous communities, children who are in institutions, who are the most vulnerable and the most marginalized, to make sure that you're not just working with a small group of middle-class children who are easy to reach. I mentioned earlier about the hemorrhaging of children as they grow older. So some ways of engaging with older children to act as mentors for, young adults to act as mentors for adults is a way of building on the skills and the experience and expertise that's been developed. I think a lot of adults feel very lacking in confidence about working directly with children in a participatory relationship. So training is a really important way of overcoming some of those gaps, reaching out to the most marginalized, and ensuring that you balance participation with best interests and protection. So finally then, monitoring and evaluation. There are two dimensions that are explored in the tool. One is how you monitor the participation work that you're doing yourself. What's the quality of what you're doing? So there's a tool which we developed it's jointly published by UNICEF, SAVE, Plan, World Vision, and the Concern for Working Children in India. And it looks at three dimensions. It looks at what's the scope of the work you're doing with children. So at what point, and it creates a matrix, so at what point in the process do you actually start to involve children? At the planning stage, situation analysis, planning, implementation, monitoring, evaluation, and at what level? Is it at the consultative, the collaborative, or the child-led level? And what is it you're trying to achieve? What's the quality of the work? Looking at the 9 basic requirements and measuring how children experience the quality of each of those 9 dimensions. And what are the outcomes in relation to the initial objectives and the indicators that you've constructed for achieving progress? And the tool gives you some very, very child-friendly, accessible ways of working with children to achieve all of those, achieve information about that, to help you really analyze the quality of what you're doing. And then secondly, there's a tool which has been developed by the Council of Europe, which you might want to use, which monitors government's implementation of Article 12. And it includes a set of 10 indicators of Article 12, which look at how far has the government gone in protecting the right to participate through laws, policies, and institutions. What has it done to raise awareness of the children's participation rights? And what have they done to create spaces at local and national level for children to participate? So this is a tool you can download from the Council of Europe website. So that's me finished.
Thank you very much, Jerison, for this insightful presentation. It provided us an excellent overview of the importance of participation in the work of IHRIs. It also helped us to understand and better unpack the concept of participation and the right for children to be heard. So thank you again, Jerison. Now I will hand over the floor to our colleagues and partners in Montenegro. We have the pleasure to have with us today Nicola Vulic, Adolescent and Youth Officer from UNICEF Montenegro Country Office. We also have Duska. Yeah, I wouldn't try Duska, sorry. So I leave it to your first name. Advisor for Children's Rights from the Office of the Ombudsman for Children. Maria and Lana as well are joining us. They are both Adolescent Golden Advisors to the Ombudsman. So thank you all for being with us again. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. This is Nicola from Montenegro. Hope you can hear me okay. Good afternoon, good evening, and of course, especially a good morning to our New York colleagues who had to get up really early this morning in order to join us. We were actually really hoping you would try to pronounce Duska's last name, but that was smart of you. If you don't mind, I'll take over as presenter so Duska can control the slides. I'll give a very brief introduction. So UNICEF has been supporting the Ombudsperson Office for a number of years. We are very proud of the work that they have done so far, and we are especially proud that they have decided to directly include youth and adolescents in their work. You will get to hear some of the experiences from some of them directly today. So in order to keep the time, I will now hand over to Duška to give you an introduction.
Thank you, Nicola. Hello everyone, my name is Duška and my last name is Šljivančanin, and I know this is very difficult to spell. Also, I am pleased to present today the Protector of Human Rights and Freedoms, Ombudsman Person, and the network of Golden Advisors. Otherwise, I'm a Child Rights Advisor in the institution and coordinator of network of Golden Advisors. The Constitution of Montenegro envisages the existence of the Protector of Human Rights and Freedoms as an independent and autonomous national mechanism for ensuring protection of human rights. Institution established with a mandate to promote and protect human rights and freedoms when they are violated by act, action, or failure to act by public authorities. Ombudsperson pays special attention to promotion and protection of children's rights, which is very important fact for all of us. Since the establishment of institutions to date, a large number of projects have been implemented on protection, improving, promoting children's rights, and promoting the institution of Protector itself as a national mechanism for protecting human and children's rights. In the past years, Protector has paid significant attention to direct work with children, aiming at familiarizing them with role and duties of the Protector and raising their awareness of children's rights and importance of its realization. In that sense, Ombudsperson has identified direct work with children in order to promote children's rights and competence of the institution. The following campaigns have been implemented, like Children Right to the Ombudsperson, Talk to Protector, and providing significant results in formal higher recognition of the Protector among children and higher number of direct communications with children. Conducted activities also include visits to schools, health and social care institutions, and daycare centers, checking the condition of all the children and condition of their stays, as well as the quality of implementation of the program and treatment of children. We also conduct different workshops with children in all of these institutions. Now it's time to introduce you with our Golden Advisors Network. Ombudsperson, Ombudspersons established Golden Advisors Network in 2014, composed of children from different parts of region of Montenegro, with a view to promoting children's rights to participation. The network initially including 12 members aged 11 to 17 years, and later it has expanded to 24 members. Members were selected on the basis of public call, and in the selection process due regard was taken of gender representation and involvement of the representatives of children belonging to vulnerable groups. Continuous communication between representatives of Ombudsperson and Golden Advisor take place through implementation of various joint activities such as continuous communication on daily basis, open debate about different children's rights and the position of children in Montenegro society, planning and holding conferences and public appearances, workshop and focus group with Golden Advisor, different kind of training and workshops and things like that. I will mention some of conferences we have held together. We are organizing the conference Let Our Voice Be Also Heard, conference Say No to Violence, conference for a stronger voice of children in society, conference children and media, and mental health of children. It's very important to mention in that moment, in one moment of our work, Golden Advisors initiated preparation of the special report on implementation of recommendation of the rights of the child, which was, of course, accepted by the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman also led the Children's Delegation in Geneva to present children's view on the various topics to the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. And to the end, I need to say that all of us are very proud of our Golden Advisors, and the voice of the children in the Ombuds work is very, very important. Golden Advisor represents an excellent model of honest participation of a child in society, and I hope that in the future it will do important things for all children in Montenegro. Now and finally, I will ask our Golden Advisors, Maria and Lana, to tell their experience in working with us. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Maria Kalezic and I'm Golden Advisor. When I was 14 years old, I became a Golden Advisor of Ombudsperson, and to be honest, I didn't really know what it meant, but I felt that it would be an extraordinary experience. At the beginning, there were only 12 of us, and since we were the first generation, nobody knew what to expect. But I must say that our results are far beyond the expectations we had. So our first step was to get informed and learn more about children's rights. We had many camps and workshops that were very useful. After a while, we started promoting our work to other children, but we also researched how much their rights are being respected in Montenegro. We have had many conferences, as Duška said. When we were preparing for our first conference, we realized that our work has become very serious. On each conference, we discussed a different problem that is important for children in Montenegro, but also in the whole world. As I said, we were working with children from all parts of the country in order to get their opinions about how much their rights are being respected. A very important moment for me is when I was invited to be a part of Children's Delegacy and to present our work and results to the UN Committee on the Rights of Child in Geneva. I was honored to have such an opportunity, and I could talk about that amazing experience for a long time. We have discussed some really important topics such as education, health and social care, children's participation, etc. The work of Golden Advisors has made an impact on children from all parts of Montenegro. We have shared our knowledge about children's rights with our peers, and we have also informed them about the Ombudsman institution who protects their rights. But most importantly, we have discussed the main problems connected to children with the UN Committee, who would propose the solutions to our country in order to improve the lives of children who live in Montenegro. When I was 14, I definitely couldn't have imagined that the participation in this network would give me such a great opportunity. I would like to emphasize that this experience is not only about the camps and workshops. The 12 of us really made friendships and we functioned like a good group. I also discovered myself. I'm almost 18 years old now and I'm graduating high school this year. The participation in this project has made a huge impact on me and on the choice of my future career. So I will probably study law and hopefully my future job will be connected to children's and human rights. I have realized how important it is not only to know our rights, but also to respect and implement them. I am very happy and proud to see that the new generation of Golden Advisors has more than 20 members, and I cannot wait to see their results, which will definitely be great. So now Lana will continue.
Hello everyone, I'm Lani Romano, it's Golden Advisor. So being a part of a team of Golden Advisors is a great honor. When I became a member of the Golden Advisors, I was concerned whether I would be able to contribute to its work successfully. However, we completed each test very seriously with the great support of people from Ombudsperson Office who were from the beginning with us. And in fact, no matter how our job seems to be easy, it's actually very demanding. We are the voice of all children from Montenegro, and in the team there are 22 children. We have learned a lot about our rights and ways to improve them, and we openly talk about problems. It is a great honor and responsibility for me to be a member of this team. We had a lot of opportunities to meet new people and to present our work in media. In our team, there are children of Rome and children with developmental disabilities, and each of us has different interests, different age, and come from different cities. I can say that all of this makes our group special, and I'm proud of the fact that each of us is respecting each other regardless of the differences. To be good at performing the tasks we have, it is first of all necessary to be persistent in achieving the goal. I think our network has a great impact on improving people's awareness of children's rights, and not just adults, but also children. One writer said, what a person actually does is more important than what they say they will do. So we are trying not only to talk about problems and our desires, but also to do something about it. And I think we are successful. In making decisions, the ombudsperson always wants to hear our opinion, which everyone's appreciate, because in this way, we can contribute to institutions to be more child-friendly. Our team is like a family that is running towards the goal and never gives up. Being a member of this team means being unique and special, and everyone respects this. My expectations when I became a member of the network were big, and all of them are fulfilled. Often people say that it is the most beautiful time when you're a child, and therefore I want to use it in the right way. Everyone in the team is very young, but we will succeed with our desire and work. Children can do anything. Thanks to our team of Golden Advisors, we will help the children to be successful and happy during their growing up.
And there you have it. I hope you learned something nice from our network of Golden Advisors, as well as from Duška and the Ombudsperson Office. And we were really, really happy to have the opportunity to share the Montenegrin experience with you. Over to you.
Many thanks to all of you, to Nicola, to Duška, Maria, Lana, for sharing the experience of Montenegro. Special thanks for giving us an opportunity to hear firsthand from two members of the network of the young advisors to the ombudsman. Thank you very much. It was really inspiring, I would say. Thanks. So now over to our colleagues and partners in the Philippines. So the colleagues who will be speaking today. So it's firstly Janet Sagizak, who is the Social Policy Chief in UNICEF Philippines Country Office. We also have the pleasure to have Commissioner Gwendoline Pimentel-Gana from the Commission on Human Rights, and Maya Perpetua Unico, who is the Program Manager Child Rights Desk at Ateneo Human Rights Center. So thanks for being with us today. Over to you, colleagues. We know it's late, so thank you very much for making the time and being here. Thanks. Over.
Thank you, Manel, and welcome everyone. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. I'm Anjanette Sagisa, I'm the Chief of the Social Policy Section in UNICEF, and with me are representatives again from the Commission on Human Rights and Ateneo. They've been our partner in a program to strengthen the capacity of the Commission on Human Rights to monitor the human rights situation of children. And for this presentation, we'd like to focus on the experience that we have on the national inquiry, conducting the national inquiry on the situation of the rights of children. The first part will be delivered by Commissioner Gwendoline Pimentel-Gana, and she will be talking about the mandate of the Commission and why they started to involve children in the functions of the commission. And the second part will be delivered by Maya Unico, and she will talk about the process of conducting the national inquiry with children. So I'm now handing over the presentation to Commissioner Gwen.
Thank you, Attorney Sagisa. Good morning to everyone in New York and to everyone in this part of the globe. Good evening. Thank you to the organizers of this webinar for giving us this opportunity to share what the Commission on Human Rights of the Philippines has done in ensuring the participation of children in our work. But first, may I start by telling you a little about the CHR. It was created in the 1987 Constitution as an independent office. As an NHRI, the CHR is supposed to protect and promote the human rights of all persons within the Philippines and Filipinos abroad. We engage both right holders and duty bearers. And for right holders, a special focus is given to the disadvantaged, marginalized, and vulnerable groups, including but not limited to children, women, and girls. To focus on the interests of the disadvantaged, marginalized, and vulnerable groups, the CHR created the Human Rights Center's Management Office in 2016. The Center's Management Office functions as a specialized oversight office tasked to develop and implement thematic and sector-specific human rights programs. It has 4 centers, namely the Center for Gender Equality and Women Human Rights, the Center for Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Center for Crisis, Conflict, and Humanitarian Protection, and the Child Rights Center. The Child Rights Center serves as the focal point of coordination and facilitation of all CHR functions, programs, and activities relating to children. It is responsible in mainstreaming child rights in all the frontline services of the CHR to include investigation, jail visitation, witness protection, financial assistance, education, and advocacy. The Child Rights Center is tasked to provide policy directions in the standard setting, capacity building, and development of child rights programs to be implemented by the Commission. The Center is also expected to contribute in the enhancement of a system that monitors government's compliance with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and other human rights tools pertaining to children. In accordance with its monitoring mandate, next slide please, the Human Rights Management Center conducted a number of inquiries, another slide please, since it was established in January of 2016. These inquiries are on the national reproductive health rights, on the situation of Filipino indigenous peoples, and the National Inquiry on Climate Change, which is still ongoing. The Child Rights Center also undertook a national inquiry on the situation of the rights of the child in 2018. This activity was a component project of strengthening capacity of the Commission on Human Rights to monitor child rights in partnership with the Ateneo Human Rights Center and the United Nations, UNICEF. And the activities that were conducted were the following: the development of operational guidelines and rules of procedure or toolkit for the monitoring of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the CHR capacity building on CRC and the monitoring toolkit, a national inquiry on the situation of the rights of the child, a validation of the monitoring toolkit and write shop on the situation on the rights of the child, and the children's validation workshop, and of course the issuance of a national situation report on children. Now, the national inquiry on the situation of the rights of the child was designed to provide a venue for children to be heard, to participate, and most importantly, influence the direction of programs and policies that will affect them. The inquiry's primary objective was to involve the children in the process of generating, sharing, documenting, and validating data relative to the status of the government's implementation of the CRC through the conduct of child-friendly modalities and approaches. Now, the process, how this was undertaken by the CHR and the Ateneo Human Rights Center and UNICEF, and to share highlights of the inquiry, will actually be discussed by Attorney Maya Unico, who is on the line. So, Attorney, please continue.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Good morning to those on the other side of the globe. I'm Maya Unico. I work with the Ateneo Human Rights Center. It's a non-government organization attached to the Ateneo Law School. So as a human rights organization, the center has a child rights desk that has been advocating for mainstreaming child participation in programs of both government and non-government organizations. When we were invited by the UNICEF and the Commission to collaborate on the initiative to strengthen the capacity of the Commission in monitoring children's rights, one of the key elements that we strongly advocated for is child participation. Why? Well, the phrase "nothing about us without us" comes to mind. So in the whole process, these standards of child participation serve as our guiding principles in every step of the way, from the preparatory stage to the national inquiries proper, and even after the inquiry. Next slide, please. So we did, next slide, please. We did a series of 4 sub-national inquiries, so we call them regional inquiries. Each of the inquiry were 2-day process, the first day being parallel sessions with adults in one group and a separate session for children's consultation. Day 2, we saw a joint session between adults and children. Each of these sub-national inquiries also focus on different child rights issues that were selected by the Child Rights Center of the Commission and their regional offices across the country, because some of the issues needed more attention depending on which region the inquiry was conducted. Next slide, please. So we also drew on, previous slide, please. We also drew on the strength of an existing project of the Ateneo Human Rights Center. It's called the Child Talk. So this is a training program for children ages 12 to 17, where children are taught about child rights and are taught to be peer trainers on children's rights. So we selected 2 alumni from this program to be the youth facilitators of the national inquiries. And to ensure that they are up to task, they were properly briefed on the background and the objectives of the capacity building project, what the regional inquiry is about, what are the objectives, what their expected roles are. And the youth facilitators themselves revised the program and came up with the design. So we also took careful steps in selecting child participants to ensure that the participation is voluntary, transparent, and informative. So we made sure that consent was given by the children and their parent. We made sure that there was proper orientation. And also to see to the safety and security of the participants, we made sure that adult companions were invited to accompany the children during the national inquiry. Special requirements were also noted for venue and logistics to ensure that it is child-friendly. We had data protection and privacy standards put in place. So, for example, separate consent was secured for photographs and videos to be taken. A child protection committee was also convened, composing of lawyers from both the Commission and the Ateneo, as well as a social worker, to ensure that children would know what to do any moment that they don't feel safe during the process. So next slide, please. The child participation approaches we used were child-friendly and appropriate to the participants' age. So the slide shows photos of some of the activities that were done. So they had drawings showing what's positive and negative in their community. They did collages to depict their aspirations and other games. We also ensured that the participation provides a safe space for the children to share their views, experiences, and insights, and the processes are respectful. Also, there is effort to ensure that participation is relevant to the experience of the children. So in this slide, we see a photo of a child who was internally displaced because of internal conflict in Marawi. It's very relevant to the region where the inquiry was conducted. Next slide, please. And finally, the last day, there's a joint session between adults and children. So the children presented their inputs in using creative manner. And adults also shared their inputs to the children. And we think that this is important because adults listening to what children have to say is really part and parcel of child participation. In this whole process, the Commission's focal persons were able to observe and work with the children as part of their capacity building. So after the inquiries, the inputs were put together by the Commission into a national situation report on children, and the report was subjected to a validation workshop also with children. This serves as an accountability mechanism to ensure that the voices of the children were accurately reflected in the report. Similar to the inquiries, the validation workshop was also facilitated by 2 child facilitators. Next slide, please. Next slide. So during the validation workshop, the children were given an opportunity to comment on the different issues contained in the report. So this is one of the slideshows, one of the activities used. They were also able to give recommendations on what the government should do to better the situation of children. The next photo would show some of the recommendations that were given by the children during the validation workshop. So there's a full documentation of the whole process that we have prepared, and we would be happy to share that with anyone who would be interested. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anjanette, Gwendoline, Maya, for giving us a good flavor of the experience of the Philippines, and for that particular focus on a very concrete experience, which was the national inquiry on the situation of the rights of the child, and the way you managed to have children participate also through the regional inquiries. Thank you very much. Now I'm pleased to hand over to our last speakers who are from Canada. So we have with us Lisa Wolf, who is the Director for Policy and Research in UNICEF Canada. We have Christian Wallen, who is the Senior Legal Counsel at the New Brunswick Office of the Child and Youth Advocate. And we also have the pleasure to have with us Abby Cartwright, who is a member of the Youth Voice Committee. So thank you all for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's Lisa Wolf here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, super. So just moving to the second slide in my presentation, the overview, I'm just going to speak very briefly about the landscape of human rights institutions for children in Canada, which for some of you might be interesting given Canada is a federal country, so they're constituted a little bit differently than in non-federal states. I'll speak extremely briefly about UNICEF Canada's engagement with human rights institutions in our country, and then turn it over to Christian and Abby, who can speak to you for the bulk of the presentation, because I'm sure you'll want to hear more from them. So moving on to the next slide, human rights institutions for children in Canada. We have at the federal level some human rights institutions. We have a Canadian Human Rights Commission, which does get involved in certain children's rights issues, but it does have a limited mandate that is based more on discrimination rather than the full range of human rights and children's human rights. So it's not a fully sufficient mechanism for children, but does undertake some very important work, including a human rights tribunal that's ongoing to adjudicate rights for Indigenous children. We have also a federal government who made an election promise in 2015 to put in place at the national level a commissioner for children and youth, but despite advocacy, including by UNICEF Canada, has not yet followed up on its election promise. And currently we have an opposition party private members bill to establish a federal commissioner for young persons. Advocacy for a commissioner at the national level has really been going on for many years in Canada. we're probably closer than we've ever been in terms of commitments, but not yet enacted. And unfortunately, this private members bill does not have time to pass before our next federal election. So we have high hopes for the next government. Moving to the next slide, provincial and territorial governments. Again, given Canada's federal, state, provincial, territorial governments have a great deal of responsibilities for children. Through legislation and budgeting, and it is very important to have strong, robust IHRIs at the, well, frankly, at the provincial territorial level. And Christian Whalen is one of those, and we'll speak to you more about the work that he does, of course. In Canada, of our 13 subnational jurisdictions, we only have 10 with HRIs, which are known as child and youth advocates or representatives for children. And it's an evolving process. There are ebbs and flows in this work subnationally. We had an unfortunate milestone in recent months where Canada's largest province, Ontario, just repealed its legislation. It no longer has an advocate for children and youth. Yet we have Prince Edward Island that took a step forward by establishing a child and youth advocate. It is not independent. It's not a statutory role at this point, but it's a step forward. I want to acknowledge also that the subnational HRIs do have varying mandates. They each have their own legislation. Not all of them are standalone. Not all of them have as robust mandates as others in line with the Paris principles, the good standards for these offices. And they do collaborate as the Canadian Council of Child and Youth Advocates. And again, very important given the lack of a national children's commissioner at this time. Moving to the next slide, we also, as some of your countries may, we do have really a few examples of local governments that have established children's commissioners, notably Montreal in Quebec, which is a promising step. And my final slide, just a quick overview of UNICEF Canada's role. We work through advocacy, through technical support and engagement to have an influence in establishing HRI. We've done some work at the provincial level. We did contribute to advocacy in Prince Edward Island, where the advocate was established, in Nunavut. Advised on their legislation. We've been advocating for a federal children's commissioner. We do cooperate with these offices to help make sure that their mandates, when they are reviewed, the legislation is strengthened. We provide training on children's rights and child rights impact assessments. And sometimes we have very exciting collaborations, as we did with the New Brunswick office and Christian Whalen's office on helping the government of New Brunswick establish child rights impact assessment across government as a way to put children's rights first. So there's just a flavor of the work in Canada and the work that you'll hear from Christian Whalen and Abby, where that's embedded. I'm going to turn it over to them now. I just want to say that Christian Whalen, who was introduced to you as the senior legal counsel in the Office of the Child and Youth Advocate, he is really one of Canada's children's rights leaders. He's done a lot of work not only in his own province to strengthen children's rights, but across Canada, and even internationally in La Francophonie countries, and as a founder of the International Summer Course on the Rights of the Child. So without any further delay, I will turn it over to Christian, who will in due course introduce Abby. And thank you, Christian and Abby, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Can everyone hear us?
Hear well. Thank you, Christian.
Okay, so we're very pleased to be invited. Lisa, I just want to check on the sound quality again. Can you hear us?
Hear you and see you. So that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we have been collaborating with UNICEF over a number of years, and thanks, Lisa, for plugging the summer course. I'd love to throw an invitation out to folks listening today for the 8th edition of the summer course on the child's right to education in Moncton at the end of June. We're very pleased to have a chance to participate in the webinar. Very grateful to UNICEF for the invitation, to our colleagues internationally. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to learn and share with each other. And it's wonderful to have the new tool and the guide that Jerison presented at the outset. Our practice in terms of child participation in the work of the Child and Youth Advocates Office is a work in progress, as you will hear from Abby and I. In many ways, in this field, we in New Brunswick have been laggards, and we have been inspired by the work of our colleagues across Canada. Unfortunately, the practice leader in this field in Canada was the Ontario Provincial Advocates Office, and the government there has just disbanded that office. Aspects of the mandate have been relegated to the Ombudsman, but the critically important work of youth amplification is no longer going to be continued by the Advocates Office, although community is mobilizing now to maintain leading initiatives that came out of Ontario, such as the Feathers of Hope and Hair Story. And I've put the links in our slide deck so that you can go and have a look at. Feathers of Hope was a process that gave voice to Indigenous youth, largely from Northern Ontario, and really help these young people move from a trajectory of vulnerability to agency and empowerment. And so Feathers of Hope spokespersons have attended events right across the country, advocating for the rights of First Nations children in their province and nationally. And they have produced a series of reports calling for change and recommendation in their communities. They have produced videos, podcasts to support that advocacy. Hair Story was a similar trajectory from very vulnerable segments of the Toronto region, really giving voice to children and youth of color in that community, and again taking them through this trajectory of self-advocacy. So we, like other advocates in Canada, have been learning from Ontario's model, and we're very concerned to see government's decision to stop funding those programs. Other best practices that I flagged here in the slide deck: the BC Representative Social Media Youth Team, sort of an innovative practice with respect to podcasts by British Columbia children and young people. We would like to develop something similar in New Brunswick. We'd like to have a very child-friendly and youth-friendly web page. So we're thinking of ways in which young people can find themselves and see themselves reflected and hear their voices through our social media and online presences, as other advocates' offices are doing. The next slide talks a little bit more about some of the things that we have done in New Brunswick. And again, I'm just providing links to pages that you can go and find out more information. One of the most successful initiatives in our province is Imagine and Be, and it's an initiative of the New Brunswick Multicultural Council that we have supported, and we're very pleased to see this kind of leadership program develop for newcomer and refugee youth in New Brunswick. And so Imagine NB is in its second year. They have put the invitation out to a cohort of 26 young New Brunswickers who are new to Canada and to the country. And they have taken them through a journey of leadership development, having bi-monthly meetings of the cohort in different parts of the province, providing them opportunities to meet with local and regional and federal elected officials, to meet with the business community, to talk about thematic challenges in each of these weekend retreats that they may face as young people in a new country. And so it's been really inspiring, again, to see that kind of trajectory from vulnerability to agency. And so that is the kind of programming that our office wants to support and do more of with other sectors. In this area, and Jarrison and Lisa are both very familiar with the Shaking the Movers process. STM is in Canada an initiative of the Landon Pearson Centre for the Study of Childhood and Children's Rights at Carleton University in Ottawa. And for 10 years now, Landon Pearson has been calling together Canadian children to learn about and talk about their rights. A few years back, we established an East Coast Shaking the Movers process so that we could replicate the opportunity for education and involvement that children in the national capital had through Landon Centre. Similarly, there have been projects in Montreal, in Toronto, at Ryerson University, and at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia. So we now have a network of Shaking the Movers reports, and they all take a common theme, and that theme is discussed in either single events or a series of events through the summer and fall of each year. And the children's reports inform the meetings of the Canadian Child's Rights Academic Network, which meets at the end of January, early February in Ottawa each year. And so that's an opportunity for listening intently to what children are saying. And then the publications of that process are made available. So with the East Coast Shaking the Movers as an office, we've tried to take that process of youth engagement a step further. And so we've had the opportunity to work with the participants in the STM process to develop videos, to develop reports, to have a public presentation of the report and recommendations, and a more private audience with both deputy ministers of education and the federal representative for the region here in Fredericton, and their local member of the Legislative Assembly, and the advocate were present for the presentation of the Shaking the Movers report last fall, which touched on the rights of newcomer and refugee youth. Currently, this spring, we're working with a number of students in the Bachelor of Social Work program at St. Thomas University to take those recommendations, which were very well received by national and provincial and local government representatives. And we're working with the children to make sure that those recommendations are carried forward into policy. So we've had some initial meetings this spring in that regard, and it's very encouraging. I'll just touch briefly on our harm prevention strategy. That was another initiative starting in 2013, where the government accepted the advocates' invitation to engage in a broad public dialogue on better implementation of Article 19 of the UNCRC in New Brunswick. And so we started with a roundtable of provincial stakeholders. We had 9 deputy ministers from different government serving departments. We had many representatives of community and academia. We had 6 young people come forward from their trajectory of child protection services. And at the first roundtable of the stakeholders decided that the youth voice wasn't sufficiently strong. And so we doubled the number of youth participants. It made for much better exchanges. It still wasn't within the ratio of, say, 50-50 youth-adult participation, but it was really a process of co-creation. And the youth came to these roundtable sessions with their homework done, and they were able to dialogue and engage with the government stakeholders and the community stakeholders and the academic stakeholders in meaningful ways. And so coming out of that consultation and dialogue process in 2015, the province adopted a provincial harm prevention strategy, and one of the main recommendations or a principal result of that strategy was to set up a permanent youth voice committee that could inform the advocate's office, but also inform the interdepartmental working group on children and youth that was established to oversee the strategy. And so Abby is one of the first recruits to that youth voice committee. She's a student here in Fredericton at Leo Hayes High School, but the youth voice committee members come from across the province, and I'll turn it over to her now and let her tell you more about that process.
Thank you, Christian. So yeah, as he said, I was one of the first New Brunswick Youth Voice Committee cohort recruits. And so I've had the pleasure of working with him and the New Brunswick Youth Advocates Office on a number of projects. And on the next slide, I listed a few. And so as he said, the International Summer Course on the Rights of the Child was a big hit last year. The New Brunswick Youth Voice Committee had the chance to attend it, and we were youth rapporteurs at the event. And so we interviewed the new members and the old members. We interviewed people from around the world on different questions we had set up, and then we created a video that was shared at our youth panel at the end of the conference. And honestly, it was a fantastic experience for me and for the rest of the Youth Voice Committee. I got them to share a few of their thoughts before I came into this, so it wasn't just me speaking, it was kind of all of us had a point of view out from this. And many said that it was an amazing experience because they usually do not think that these things happen, but there's so much that many youth don't understand that happens behind closed doors, and that was one of the ways that I was thankful to attend. A second thing that the New Brunswick Youth Voice Committee was a part of was the Monitoring Child Participation in Child Protection case study with Dr. Tara Collins, and it was an international and Canadian child rights partnership. And we talked about topics like the barriers to participation. And so, for example, what is needed and what can be left out in situations with vulnerable youth, and how not all youth have the ability to come to the table like myself and talk about problems in their communities. And so a big thing was trying to find the people who aren't always seeking the help that they need. and another one was protective factors. So how can you have participation in groups but also protect the children from harm in those groups? This was an awesome event, and I honestly believe that I learned a lot from it, because with activities that happened in this case study, I helped me kind of create another forum on school reform, which I will talk about later. But as many may know, in Canada we have a Child Rights Education Week. And so this year the New Brunswick Youth Voice Committee created a video for CREW. And so we talked about our favorite articles and how this helps in our community and how these articles affect us and what they mean to us and our interpretations of them. And so for that was a lot of us participated in it, and I have to thank the New Brunswick Youth Voice, New Brunswick advocates, because without them, the video probably wouldn't have happened, and they're a good constant reminder of what we need to do to keep on task. And on the next slide, as Christian touched on it, the harm prevention strategy was one of our main goals at the start of my recruitment. So after I joined the New Brunswick Youth Voice Committee, and so its title was Keeping Children and Youth Safe from Harm in New Brunswick. And so after we were, given a role on our committee, each youth picked a specific section of the harm prevention strategy, and we researched it, and we went back into our communities and we talked with our communities at our schools and outside of school about what we thought needed to happen and what we thought needed to change in order to create a better harm prevention strategy. And then we reported back to the committee, and we created a lengthy document of our kind of cheat sheet of what we thought needed to be said and all the research we did to back it up. And so then we presented at a round table in the province's capital last year, and each youth presented their report to NGOs in the field that we researched, and also people who were interested and had their jobs in that field. And honestly, I was very thankful for that opportunity, because it gave me a chance to see what happened and how my voice can be heard. And it was pretty interesting, because most of the time the youth reported back, and we found that we knew more of the facts in the field and came to the discussion ready to discuss. And I feel like the NGOs in that field were definitely a little blown away by our amount of research that we did at that time. And then on the next slide, as I said, I had the chance to work with the Youth Voice Committee, but also in my community, the Partners for Youth. And so Partners for Youth kind of does forums around our province, and the community that it is in that year gets to choose what they feel needs to be changed in the community and what they feel should be talked about. And so this creates an open dialogue between the youth and the people who are in charge of making the changes in that community. And so I created a little pro-cons verse sheet so that you can see the visual. I myself am a pretty visual person, so I thought it might help a few of you. And so in my first kind of block, I said that the youth voice community creates opportunities for engagement. And this is so true, because without my how I joined the Youth Voice Committee, I don't believe that I would be able to have the same opportunities like this one, and like many as I said before. And in the Partners for Youth forums, this is a once a year thing that happens in a community, only one per year. And so it's an opportunity for engagement that spans about, I've been working on this forum for about 3 months, but the forum is a one-day thing, and then it's kind of, we compile a report, and after that we send it away to those who need to see it. And so the Youth Voice Committee definitely creates more opportunities for engagement, which is something that is awesome, and I feel like that all provinces should have. And then Another point I put in red was independent yet structured. So for us, we are all youth and we are awesome. We are teens and we love to talk. And that's the thing. So we all have our opinions. And at the start, when I first joined, it was moderated. And we always had an adult in on our calls because it's awesome that we have our voices and our voices are heard. But in the child-friendly sector, as it's said in the document, we often don't have the resource of somebody in charge leading the pack of giving us things that we need to do more often. And it's no fault of the New Brunswick Youth Voice advocates because I understand life is busy. And we often we are not the priority here, but our voices are heard. And that is something that, I don't know, I feel like it can be changed for the better. For Partners for Youth, independent yet structured. So for them, there's always an adult in our meetings, and they kind of structure the meetings so that we aren't always in charge because often we have not the skills to fully create a functioning meeting for ourselves. And so for the Youth Voice Committee, I said that diversity and connection is a huge thing. And definitely with our second cohort, we diversified even more. So we have people from around the province speaking languages, people who their first language is English, people who their second language is French, and people who their first language is French, from all different genders and all ethnicities and abilities. And that is something that I loved from the start of this, because that is the full way to get the voice of the youth in the community. Compared to Partners for Youth, where right now we are only functioning in the Anglophone sector of the school district, and that is something I want to change, and I believe that we'll get there, but it has no equivalent to the diversity of the Youth Voice Committee. One thing I put in red in the next is advertise in all vulnerable sectors. For me, I wouldn't have heard about this without my connections throughout the school, and I felt like the first cohort did not advertise all the vulnerable sectors, but definitely in the second cohort and in the, I guess in the next cohorts, we want to advertise to all the vulnerable sectors so that the voices of children who truly need to tell their disadvantages in their communities or how they need help should be heard and should be equal to those of mine or say any other child. And that's the same for the Partners for Youth forums. We reached out to participants through if they knew in the leadership communities at my school or in the communities, but not to all the vulnerable sectors. And for the Youth Voice Committee, I say continuous engagement, which is something I touched on earlier, and it's something that really shows with all the things that I've been able to accomplish in the New Brunswick Youth Voice Committee, compared to Partners for Youth forums, where that is not a continuous engagement. And the Youth Voice Committee definitely shows real improvements, and that's the big thing. So we're not just talking to make us feel better about the fact that our voices are heard, but you can see real changes with how our voices are heard. So it's not just talking to a blank wall. We actually get feedback from what we say, and we actually get to see the changes that our voices make, and that's a huge thing because not every youth engagement kind of initiative shows that, and that's something that I definitely think that other people should engage, is how the improvements are shown. So that is something that is definitely a big pro for the Youth Voice Committee. Compared to the Partners for Youth forums, it is not a government kind of sanctioned event. It is a non-government sanctioned event. So we're not always reaching those who need to hear what we're saying, which is something that the Youth Voice Committee definitely does well. And that is all.
Thank you very much, Lisa, Christian, Abby, for this very comprehensive presentation. It gave us a very good sense of the context, I would say, of the advocacy efforts at national level, also the concerns related to the recent developments in Ontario, and the great experience of the New Brunswick province. So thank you very much to all three of you for this presentation. We'll now pass to the Q&A session. We are over time. It's almost 8:30 here in New York, so we'll take only a few questions, mostly those that are already in the box. So I'll start. I'm pleased to start with a question that came from a colleague working in the disability section here in New York, Christelle. So Christelle was asking if Montenegro could elaborate a bit on how they managed to ensure participation of children with disabilities, if there were any measures that was taken to ensure that their voices were heard. So over to you, Montenegro, Nicola, Duska, Mariah, Lana. Feel free to take the floor on this one.
As we mentioned in our earlier presentation, Network of Golden Advisors have Roma children and children with disability in their team. All of them have a different interest in, but every voices of children is very important for us, and that makes our network very special. We need heard what children with disability or children of vulnerable groups thinks about different topics, and they are included with other children in the same way.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in Montenegro?
With other children, their ideas, proposals, suggestions contribute to protection and improvement of children's rights in the same way. And they promote in their school and local community children's rights and institutional protector as well.
The sound is not great, so I'm not sure if you are done, colleagues in Montenegro.
Yes, over from us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the answer. I'll pass now to a next question that's related to. So it's a question that came from colleague Kulai Yasuma. So he was asking if there were good resources that colleagues could share on the promotion of an understanding of children as right holders, both for children and adults that work with them. The understanding, he focused on the second part of his question on really the understanding of right as something that's beyond protection per se. So I would direct that question to Jerizan, if you are comfortable to answer that, Jerizan. It's over to you. Thanks.
Okay. I mean, it's difficult to know where to start, really. There are lots of publications, and there are lots of training resources that are available. I think probably the best thing would be if you I could share out my email, and maybe I could send you some links to materials that might be helpful. I mean, presumably you're asking for materials beyond just participation, but children as rights holders more generally. There are so many materials out there. It would be useful to know exactly what it is would be helpful for you, and then perhaps we could have a dialogue about how to take that forward. Certainly there's, UNICEF have a lot of publications. There's a lot of materials published by Save the Children. There are practical guides on undertaking participation with children produced by UNICEF for different contexts. There's a number of books with edited books with articles looking at different aspects of children as rights holders and how those rights need to be realized. So I would leave it at that really, but maybe if we can ensure that we link up after this call.
Thank you, Jerison. Yeah, I think that's an excellent way forward, and we'll be happy in UNICEF as well to take that on board and discuss further with Kula. Another question for you, Jerison, coming from Mauritania. So it's a question about the measurement of the impact of participation. So I think that could be a good question for you, Jerison, given that you touched on the M&E and the conceptualization of child participation. So over to you again. Thank you.
Okay. Well, the tool that I mentioned, which is very much trying to look at to help people gather data on what the impact of participation is. It's a tool which we developed, and we piloted it in 10 countries and with children, and then we brought a whole load of children together. We had a sort of reflection week. A week-long meeting in Ghana with groups of people from many of the countries that had taken part. And what it does is it tries to look at the way in which children get involved, and what it does is enable both the adults involved in those initiatives and the children themselves to really reflect on what does this participation look like? What did it feel like? At what point did we get involved? Did we feel we ought to have been more involved? Could we have contributed more? Has this achieved the kind of objectives that we wanted to achieve? And then it looks at, as I said, it looks at quality. And one of the tools for measuring the quality of children's participation is we suggest collecting the data through an exercise called pots and beans, and you give every child 3 beans in a little pot, and they have to grade the participation according to how many, whether it's a 1, 2 or 3 or not beans, and then they have to negotiate with other children and sort of really reflect on and discuss how the participation took place. And what we try and encourage people to do is think about, for example, if you were undertaking setting up a youth advisory committee for the NHRI, maybe what you would want to do at the very outset with the children was identify, well, what is it we want to achieve with this? Where do we want to go with this? Is it that we want to achieve confident, competent children who feel able to participate more broadly in their community? Is it we want to change a particular piece of policy or legislation? Is it that we want to raise awareness? So you'd set yourself a set of goals, and then look at how will we know if that's been achieved. And the tool gives you a whole set of matrices for tracking and measuring those processes. And the whole idea is that it engages in, what it does is encourage a process of dialogue with children, with the adults working with children and the children, the young people themselves, on what's been achieved, why it's been achieved, how it's been achieved, and whether that has met their expectations, and therefore what needs to change to improve the strength and strengthen the quality of the participation. So it's a very, very practical tool, and so you can download it from Save the Children's website. I put the link on the slide. So that's a way in which you could really engage in a quite practical process of looking at what the impact is of the participation. One of the other things that Chris and I are both involved in is this Global Child Initiative, where we are developing structural process and outcome indicators for every article in the Convention, including, of course, Article 12. So that includes a whole set of measures that governments need to take and outcomes that we would want to achieve for participation. And I'm also working with UNICEF in New York with the adolescent team, where we've developed a conceptual framework of adolescent participation. And we're trying to identify key domains of outcomes, like children's self-esteem and self-confidence, children feeling that they are listened to and taken seriously, children feeling that they are able to take responsibility for those decisions they're competent to make, and children's opportunities to engage in the civic environment, and then construct a series of indicators against that. And what UNICEF is doing is developing a survey module with these 4 domains. And the idea will be it will be incorporated into the mix data collection system, but it will also be a standalone survey on outcomes of children's participation. So there's quite a lot of work going on, which will help, I think, provide you with the tools and resources to begin to collect that evidence.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jerizan. I see a question from Andrea from Gambia about the establishment, so the recent establishment of an IHRI in Gambia, and discuss the need to discuss main challenges and problems that have been faced by others. If we can take that on, Andrea, later on by email, we'll be happy to put you in touch with colleagues who have recently established an IHRI or others who are more advanced. We are also planning this year to have additional webinars, and hopefully one will be looking specifically at the establishment process and the beginning of the work and the engagement with UNICEF and partners. So thank you for that. I see a question from Gopi, and we will indeed, as mentioned by Adam, we'll follow up bilaterally and put you in touch with colleagues, potentially Afghanistan, but probably even other countries. So looking again at the questions, there was a question from Ekin to Dushka, and I see that Nicola actually sent a link for further information on the preparation of the CRC submission and the involvement of children. So that's indeed a very good example. So thank you for sharing, Nicola. We'll look at that more in details. And I think that's probably all. There was a question for Canada for Christian. So maybe we can go to that question and probably conclude there. So the question was from Dragan. How do you deal with issues that are under the federal government jurisdiction? So if you could try to quickly provide a response, Christian, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, it is definitely a challenge. Lisa mentioned at the outset the hope that Canadians have to have a national commissioner for children. This has been a constant recommendation from the Committee on the Rights of the Child in the 3 previous concluding observations that Canada has received, and we are reporting again this year. So we're going to go back before the committee still without significant progress on that file. The answer of past federal governments has been that, where in a federal structure like Canada's, critical issues of children's rights, such as access to healthcare, educational services, child protection services, are areas of provincial responsibility, that the federal government is relying on the Canadian Council of Child and Youth Advocates. But like Lisa mentioned, there's a gap in terms of not all provinces and territories have an independent child advocate's office. Where they do exist, their mandates are not fully conforming with Paris principles and the breadth of mandate under the convention. Sometimes they have a dedicated mandate only for youth in care. And so there's a huge challenge and a gap in implementation in terms of national human rights institutions specialized for children in Canada. Currently, the Canadian Bar Association is focused on that question and developing a position paper, and we're hoping perhaps also model legislation for what does standard child and youth advocate legislation in Canada need to look like to be fully adhering to the Paris principles. and could that model serve the federal government as well? So thanks for the question.
Very much, Christian. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, everyone, for your participation and for being patient with us and staying longer than planned. So we'll be following. We'll be glad to follow up with you on the issue we discussed and raised just now. You should be able to download the PowerPoint, but in any case, we are also happy to share it with you by via email. So I would like to take that opportunity to highlight the fact that we have another webinar to come, which will explore in more depth the issue of child-friendly complaint mechanisms. So that will take place on 15th of May, so in about a month time. We are definitely willing to continue and pursue this type of engagement, build on child rights accountability work in partnership with all of you. So that's a big thank you from UNICEF New York, and glad we'll be together again, hopefully for a next webinar. Thank you all again, and wishing you all the best.